yamsketch.
Hey everyone, how's it going? So, last time we took a look at drawing noses using the tie method, like the necktie method, and that's a really cool method. And if you want to check that out, check out the link, go see it. But I wanted to show another method for drawing the nose, and that is the ball method or the sphere method. And the reason I want to show you multiple ways to do things is because, you know, these are all tools. None of this has to do with what's real. It just has to do with what works. Like what works for you, what gets you to the point where you understand the anatomy and you can draw it. This is all about simplifying down, you know, breaking stuff down into basic shapes so that you can draw it in your mind. You can rotate it, draw it from any other angle. If you're drawing a comic or animating or whatever, you don't always have like that exact angle. You have to invent it in your head. And the only way to do that is to break stuff down into simpler things and simpler shapes so you can really like play with it. So the tie method is a great one, but I want to show you another method too. The more tools you got in your tool belt, the better you're going to do. So this is the sphere method or the ball method, and the basic idea behind this is that you're thinking of circles when you draw them as not just circles that are flat, but as spheres or balls that are 3D and they have light on them and they have shadows and then they have form. So when they connect to other things, that cast shadows on them and so on. And the easiest way to do this is just to start drawing. So let's take a look at it. So if I have a nose, the important circles are, of course, the ball of the nose or the main like kind of bulbous part of the nose, the nostrils, right? Those could be, you could think of those as spheres or balls. The brows, actually. And if you even want to, you can break those into two spheres because there's two muscles there that come together when you furrow your brows. That's why those muscles make a crinkle, is because you're smushing two muscles together. So that is a couple of spheres. And then I would actually recommend either drawing a sphere here for kind of the bridge of the nose or even breaking that into two spheres. And the reason why is because most of us have actually a shape to our nose that happens, in this area here. And from the side, that might be like a deep Roman nose, if you've seen those kinds of noses, or it might be like a scooping nose for someone who has kind of like a button nose. It might be, like a sort of a warbly nose, or it might even be quite straight, like an aquiline nose. So you can see there's quite a lot of variety in nose shapes. If you just look up here, you can see a bunch of those. This one's scooping in. This one's going almost pretty straight. This one's got that nice bump to it. This one's kind of got a nice soft roll. You can see that there's a lot of variety there, and that's where you can kind of have fun with the character. So if you draw your spheres with that in mind, if like there's a high point here, then that's where one muscle group ends and another muscle group or bone group begins. And that's why we're drawing spheres. The spheres really represent muscles in 3D space. So if I have two muscles that come together and smush, like a butt, then what will happen is this one, let's say the light's coming from here, this one gets a bunch of shade on it, but it also casts its shadow on this next one, right? Which also gets its shade on it. And then what you get is you start to get form, and that shadow describes to us how that form is in the world, how it's sitting. And that's how we understand it when we see it in a drawing, right? So knowing where these kind of clumps of muscle are is useful, and being able to just draw them with a simple shape is also useful, because if you have to know exactly like the muscle group and what bone it's going into and yada yada, it's just like it's pretty annoying, when you just want to draw something nice and fast. So also this is how you can make like a nice butt chin or like a nose butt, because this happens where someone has like their nostril here and then they've got that kind of like butt nose. All right, so anyway, so we're gonna take this little guy here, and which kind of looks like a little mouse or something. Okay, and we're gonna turn it into a nose. So the idea here is these are the nostrils, and this is where this bottom of the nose would connect into go down into your mouth, and so on down here. This is where your brows are. So this is where the eyebrows would begin, right at the end of this muscle, continuing down your face. This area you can see is already kind of being created, and that's your eye socket. Your eye socket's a lot bigger than the actual eyeball that you see because your whole eyeball has to fit in there, but then you have an eyelid over it, right? So that is in there, and then you can start to think about expressions and folds in the face and how long it's been since you've slept. So you got a bunch of eye bags and so on, right? So that is how you can kind of start to bring the nose into the face. And remember that the nose is part of a bigger system. So there's a bunch of connections. You can see when the nostrils tuck in, that comes out in a fold this way, right? That goes down into the mouth. And you can see when someone's yelling or when they're tired, or sometimes just people have pronounced kind of, folds here into their nostrils. And so you can kind of see those all go all the way down into a dimple or whatever. But keep in mind when you're drawing the nose, just less is more. So even though we're kind of taking a look at this to get a real good feel for the anatomy, when you actually go to draw this, you don't need to draw all these things, right? Like it's enough to just suggest them. So what I would do when I'm drawing this is I'm going to create a new layer to make this even more obvious. I would tone this down, right? I would take this anatomy that I've created here in the structure. I know that this is here. I know that there's muscles and shadows and all this stuff, but I wouldn't draw all of it, right? I would draw my eyebrow, a little bit of my eyebrow. There we go. There's my brow. I might, if they have an expression, if they're angry, I might draw a little bit of the brow here. It depends. And then I might draw like a suggestion. So let's say the light's coming from here. So the shadow's on this opposite side. So there, boom, there's a little shadow. And then I need the bottom of my nose coming down into my mouth. Okay, so I need that. I need my nostril, but just suggest it. That's enough. I need like that and that for my nostril. I'm not even going to draw this stuff because it's, makes people look kind of ugly. And then this is a cool thing. Since I know that the top of my nose ends here, I might sort of suggest that. And then maybe just a basic shape there, right? So done. That's probably enough. Maybe I could suggest something here. I don't think I even need to. Maybe just a little bit of a suggestion, but I don't think I even need to. And then the last thing is I'll turn that off, boom, and you can see this nose looks fine. You don't need to draw every single thing, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of shade the nostrils out, and then I'm going to think, okay, well, we had this big ball here, right? Like there's that ball, and this ball is also like a sphere, so it about here, it's turning away from the light, so it's kind of doing that, right? So now we'll kill that, and we'll shade this, because this is where the light isn't reaching as much. So there we go. So that's all nice and shaded. And then if I wanted to, this is like the roof of the nose here, right? So this is gonna come up like that, right? And come up here too. And eventually it's gonna have like the kind of a flat part, right? So I wanna just sort of do that and shade this too, because that's gonna fall into shadow. Right? And then maybe this brow a little bit falls into shadow because on this side it's like a sphere, and on this side it's like a sphere. So that falls into shadow, and then maybe this catches a little bit of shade just because it's tucking in here. And done. We're done. Look, I don't need to screw this guy up by drawing all these muscles in here, right? That's just going to make them look ugly. But knowing that they're there, having that structure underneath, is what allows me to draw this and have it look like a decent nose, right? So it is really important to be aware of the structure, but don't feel like you have to always point it out. Like knowing that someone has a mole on their face doesn't mean you should just draw a big mole on their face, because it's just going to make them look ugly. Like, why do that, right? You don't have to draw every wrinkle in somebody's face, because it's just going to be, it's not going to be kind to them. So, so when you're drawing a face, I really do think less is more, especially with things like the nose and the mouth. So just focus on the basic shapes, and you'll get a really nice form to your nose. So that's a little thing I wanted to cover with the nose. And one more thing. So I said talking about balls, but noses mostly. That keeping this ball in mind gives you like an idea of the form. Well, I've got a little shortcut for you guys. I've made a little brush here called the crescent sphere brush. And what this does is it creates a little crescent sphere in the direction that you pull. So if you draw this and pull, it'll put the shadow where you pulled. So for instance, if I pull down, the shadow's down. If I pull up, the shadow's up. If I pull right, it's right, and so on, right? And I can get that at any angle. And then if I change my brush size, I can get different size spheres, okay? So I have it pretty light on purpose because this is for drawing over. So this is a really good way to practice drawing the nose and to remember that it has form, that it's not just flat. So how I recommend using this is like this. Think about your basic nose shape, right? Maybe even give yourself a little sketch guide, and then think about these shapes. So here's the ball of that nose. See, there it is. I could even, go a little bit bigger if I wanted to. Boom, and it's got a shadow down, so I pull down. And how this brush works is you put it dead center of where you want the ball, right? So just the whole nose is in there, so I put it in the middle-ish and pull down. Boom, I get that ball of the nose, right? And then I can shrink down here. I can come on down to about the size of the nostril. And then, again, the light's from the same place. So I'm going to pull down and pull down. So now I know I got the nostrils and I got the ball of the nose. Okay, so I'm going to just do that over here to show you a quick way to kind of build this up. I also have a variant of this brush called the Crescent Sphere Warp, which is cool. It uses the kind of the tilt and the angle of your brush, if your brush supports that, to give you like a warped sphere. Nothing's ever perfect in nature, so you don't always have to use a perfect sphere. So this is actually kind of fun for me. I like this one. You can use either one. So if I pull down, let's just do the shadow kind of down, and then I kind of grab some nostrils that seem like they're about the right size. And remember, the nostril doesn't have to be out here. That would be a huge note, like Mario kind of nose. They might be, but a lot of people have nostrils that are come in close. So play with that. Like they might be really tight, they might be kind of loose, or they might be way out here. It depends on the person you're looking at, right? But let's draw something from the front. If I want to go from the side, I'd probably put one here and out there, right? So you can see this one's floating on above them from kind of a 3/4. But I'm going to just do from the front. Let's put one there, and let's put one there. And the other thing is too, up and down too. Like some people have a bulbous nose, so it hangs down. Some people have, like kids especially, they'll have like a bigger nose with the nostrils lower. So just look at your reference and make sure that it kind of makes sense with that. So here's like that area of the nose. I'm also going to create, pulling down with the same shadow because we're all in the same lighting. I'm going to create sort of the area of the brow. And then I don't really need to draw this in because we'll come up with the bridge of the nose. But if it's helpful for you, you could even use this to draw like the bridge of the nose, if that makes sense. So, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. So now that we've got our basic shapes here, you could just go to your favorite whatever brush. I'm just going to use a Kyle's pencil because I like it. But use your favorite drawing brush, and we're just going to draw using this as a guide. So we probably have a furrow here in our brow at some point, right? So we know that the eyebrows start up here somewhere. We also know that the nostrils are going to kind of come around and come in. So they're going to come around and come in. And then this is going to have a shape. So it might not be perfectly round. It might be, sort of flat or sort of warped or sort of pointy. It just depends on the kind of nose that you want to draw. But let's draw like a little bit more of a pointy nose. That comes up, wraps around in this nostril, right? And then we can kind of shade those. There we go. All right, and then this tucks around. So the nostril, remember, tucks in and around. Tucks in and around. We don't have to draw it all, but it's helpful to know that it happens. Tucks around. And then the ball ends up here, right? So we can kind of know that that's sort of the top of our nose. We can see, actually, what I like about this tool is you can kind of see where the shadows connect together. So where it starts to get, from the light into the dark side of the sphere. And then you just basically draw through all three spheres and connect them together into one to get that form, right? Because you know that this big ball is going to end here, and then but it's going to blend into that nostril, right? And then you can just shade that. Oh, and by the way, I've drawn all these with the lighting from kind of the top, but even if the lighting wasn't in the top, this is still going to work the same way. So if you have a flashlight shining up on someone's nose, then this is going to be the bright part, and then this part is going to be the part in shadow, right? That could happen too. And then that'll be in shadow. So you can play with the lighting. You don't have to, it's going to change depending on where the light source is. But let's just keep it for here for now. Okay, so we got that. And of course, these are three balls. So this ball is going to be, have its own kind of shadow come in here. and this ball is going to have its own shadow, and this ball is going to have its own shadow. So that's how we know. We're drawing them and they look like circles, but with this tool it helps you remember that they're spheres. So that's why I made this little brush. And again, I'm going to link this brush down below, so you can feel free to use this brush. Let's give this a little suggestion here. And then now, so the bridge of the nose, big and thick like that, or is it like a little weak nose or whatever? You know, that's up to you to decide, but let's just draw the bridge like that. Draw it kind of like a bridge that's got a little bit of thickness to it up top, okay? And then this one, of course, you can see this sphere is one sphere. If we break it into two spheres, it's gonna just, we're gonna have that same shadow kind of over here. So there's some shadow. Right, there's some shadow. And the real reason that I made this little sphere brush, well, actually there's a lot of cool things you can do with the crescent sphere brush, but for using it for nose drawing, it's really just like a good guide. And then you need the bridge, you know, that's going to kind of be at the top of the nose somewhere. So it might be shaped like that, or it might be shaped like this. You know, it's up to you how to shape it, but let's make it kind of roundish and bulbous a little bit. And then we know that the shadow is going to fall down over there, you know? And then, you know, you can make this softer. This is like a sharp nose, and then if they have a soft nose, you just carefully blend that in, or whatever tool you're using. If you're using paint or whatever, you just, you know, make that a softer blend, and then it'll make it look like the nose is softer and more round, right? So, and then this part can be tricky, but remember, you have nostril tucking in here, you have the bulb of the nose as kind of the big shape that's on top, and then you also have this stuff coming down. So the easiest way to think about that is, you know, at a certain point, the shadow is going to end, so you can kind of just have that come in here. There's probably, because there's three different things tucking together here, there's probably going to be like a little sharp shadow in there somewhere, right? Probably in there somewhere. And then it just depends, like if they have a really deep sort of muscle pulling down to their mouth, you know, if they've been laughing a lot during their life, then that'll be darker. If, you know, if they're very delicate, then that might not be dark at all. So you just have to look at the reference. But yeah, I'm just going to kind of come around with this, shade the ball of this nostril. And then I'm going to shade the ball of this, the top of the nose, the kind of the bulb of the nose. Okay. So bam. And then if this is too bright, you know, because that would be very prominent, just kick the whole thing back, because it is on the other side that's sort of in shadow. So just kick it back, but less kick back than this other really dark part, right? And there you go. So now you can see that's again another way to approach the nose is by thinking of this in big balls and spheres, and thinking about things in 3D shapes. And that's a really useful way to think of things too. Again, remember, it's not that the muscle is round, it's that by thinking of it round, it makes it easier for you to draw. That's the important thing. We're just using these basic shapes as angles and measurements and ways to measure the stuff that we're looking at, but also to like change it and move it around in our brain, in our head. So if we want to rotate it and draw it from another angle, we can see something in real life and then rotate that in our head, because it's hard to rotate a person's face in your head, but it's a lot easier to rotate like a sphere in your head and another sphere, right? And then the sphere moves behind that sphere. That's easier to do than to just like think about all the complexities of like someone's face and try to rotate that. So it's good to take what you know mixed with a little bit of technique, and then you can get pretty fast at this stuff. So I just wanted to show you that as a quick technique. Again, I'm going to put the sphere brushes as things that you guys can use, and if you enjoy those, cool. I hope you do enjoy them. So anyway, if you have questions, comments, or otherwise, leave them down below. Happy to answer anything that you guys are asking. Happy to tackle any of the problems that you guys are having. So yeah, write that stuff down below. I'll see you guys later. Cheers.
Yamsketch.